When you look at the technological differential between, let's say, US, Israel, and Iran, it's a huge differential. Almost, this is the fourth week of the war running. We don't see Iran giving up.
Usually in movies, we see about army parades in a heroic manner. These kind of things are seen. But what exactly is the lived condition of an army person?
Not all that romantic as the movies make it out. Those who are deployed along the border are extremely, I would say, demanding, with great amount of privation, very frugal living in bunkers, tents, no basic facilities. So we start with the first stage close to 9,000 feet, then goes to second stage and third stage. But the troops are acclimatized up to third stage. That means they are fit for operations beyond 15,000 feet.
The US Pentagon's 2025 report says that China has always put Arunachal Pradesh as one of its core interests. Now, is this hardening stance of China signaling something to India?
No, it's basically China has...
Major General ND Prasad, sir, welcome to the Honest Hour.
Thank you, Shashank. It's a pleasure to be with you and share my experience and my journey of almost 4 decades in the Indian Army.
Pleasure is ours, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, 1984, this year was a very distinctive year in Indian history. The former Prime Minister of India, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, was assassinated. There was Operational Blue Star and also the Bhopal gas tragedy, Delhi riots, several other issues. Like, the whole nation was on the grip of something unusual. And in this specific year, you have decided to get into the Indian Armed Forces. Any specific reason behind this, sir? I
was born into an army family. My father was an army officer. Okay. So it was naturally my first choice.
Yes, sir.
So in 1980, when I was in class 11th, I appeared in the UPSC exam for National Defense Academy, which I cleared.
Right.
Then, of course, we had the interview. It's called the Services Selection Board.
Yes.
Which I cleared again. And then after the medicals in January 1981, I joined the NDA, Khadakwasla, for a 3 years program there, during which, while we were all trained for physical activities, also in certain amount of military activities, essentially it was an academic endeavor. I did my Bachelor of Science and graduated with a Bronze Torch for Excellence in Academics. Then we did 1 year training at IMA, which finished in December 1984.
Okay.
So I actually got commissioned in December 84, while all the events that you're mentioning were actually happening around us.
Yes.
And that was a time in the final year at IMA, Dehradun. We were being trained to be launched into operations of any of these that you just mentioned.
Yes, sir.
Be it, counter-terrorist operations or aid to civil authorities for the riots in Delhi or any such activity. So that confidence was there in us that given the opportunity, we will just be able to perform and do a job.
So you were already conditioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So like you mentioned about NDA, right? So this very NDA, you were later commissioned as an instructor over there, chief instructor. Yeah. So what did you see, sir? Like, earlier you were the one who got trained over there and later you were the instructor. So what are the leadership lessons that you as an instructor learned from the fellow?
See, when I went to NDA as an instructor, I was instructor at 2 places, Officers Training Academy in Chennai,
right,
and then National Defense Academy, Khadakwasla. So as a cadet, you are on a learning curve. You're learning all that is being taught to you. You're experiencing maybe certain amount of leadership incidents and learning. But as an instructor, you are training your cadets to be those leaders that are required for operations. So in the process, you are actually, putting them through various rigors of training to toughen them up mentally and physically. Physically, the academy takes care. The curriculum is quite demanding.
Right.
And but there are all kinds of cadets. Each cadet is made differently. They come with different levels of thresholds for stress. So we actually are there to guide them through that periods of stress,
right,
so that they're able to sustain that rigorous training and come out of it as better leaders. So we are looking at training them in team building, in taking on leadership roles, initiative, integrity, honesty, courage. These are the qualities. Then we look at each of these cadets, and at least when I was there, I was trying to ensure that they don't lose their identity.
Right.
Because it's very easy to lose identity when you're being trained en masse. So my sole purpose was to ensure the individual character is retained. And they come out as somebody special. Each one is special. So that character had to be retained. That was my focus when I was training them.
That's quite an interesting thing, sir. Like retaining the identity rather than what you call as everybody being uniform. You ensured that the people retain their identity at the same time they have the coherence of military ideology. Yes, sir. So, like, what is that one most important trait that you identify in a young cadet that once you see that, you can know that, okay, this person is going to be extraordinary in the service?
Cadets, when we look at them, we have a bunch of cadets who join us. Like I said, each and everybody comes to us with a different unique character.
Right.
So when we look at them and we see them perform at various activities in the academy, it's not that you just make up immediately, but we constantly observe them during various outdoor activities, and then we are also following them in their academic performance. So it's a regular monitoring of their performance, let's say 24/7 almost. We are with them and seeing how they are responding to various stresses and strains of training, which is rigorous.
Yes.
And then how are they responding to intellectual pursuits in academics? So they should be able to have a good combination of both brains and brawns.
Right.
So when we look at them, and there are certainly some of these cadets who stand out because of their ability to withstand pressure. They are resilient. They are very focused on achieving brilliance and excelling in everything they do. So when we notice that they're an all-rounder in the sense that they're good in outdoors, good in games and sports, they're good in academics, and that doesn't take much time. It takes about a couple of months. And then since we are monitoring them on almost a daily basis, we are able to predict who's going to perform well in future. We may go wrong because environmental factors after they get commissioned,
yes, sir.
Which unit they go to, how they are groomed, that does come into play. But we are quite accurate in the predicting in their, at least in the immediate future.
Yes.
Some of them, they pass out. I remember I had mentioned for a cadet that this cadet will pass out with one of the top 3 medals.
Right, sir.
And he got a medal. I was not there to see him. I would have been happy to see him receive the medal. But he performed extremely well. And I'm glad that the assessment was actually, kind of vindicated by what that boy did. It was very nice to see that happen.
Amazing to know, sir. So, like just a while ago, you mentioned like some of the cadets are very bright and they perform exceptionally well. They end up getting medals in the academy. Now, as far as your experience is concerned, so like these people who are successful or who win medals in the academy, in their career also, do they perform exceptionally well?
Yeah, generally what has been observed is these students or cadets who get medals in, let's say, NDA or respective academies in Navy, Air Force and Army,
right,
they do perform well even in the service. There are very few exceptions who don't perform well. That's because either the individual has been through some kind of a trauma and has not been able to recover personal trauma in personal life, or has somehow lost interest, which is very rare. Most of these people are high achievers.
Right.
And my observation and experience is they have done well. They may not all end up as the Chief of Army Staff or Chief of Air Staff because there's only one person who can. And not necessarily the chiefs are the best among their batchmates also. Usually it is not so. but very rarely do these people not perform well.
Right.
They usually perform well.
So empirically, there is a correlation that
Yes.
top performers remain to be performing
Well,
throughout their career.
Throughout their career.
Relatively.
Yeah.
Yes. So like, while I was going through your profile, one of the very interesting thing was like you're an alumnus of IIM.
Yeah.
How did this IIM experience help you in the battlefield and vice versa?
No, IIM experience was basically I had gone for a short program there on leadership.
Okay.
And I was just analyzing as to what is it that the IIMs are teaching, which is different to what we are teaching. Since I was very keen on leadership development and these aspects, so I wanted to look at something which they are doing, and I wanted to identify if there's something that we are missing out, or is there something that we can do differently. So that was very interesting experience, wherein I shared the combat leadership that we do with the professors there, which they're not exposed to. They're looking at corporate leadership and business management skills. So it was kind of exchange of ideas, and I thought I came back enriched with the theoretical aspects of leadership, which we are only practicing but not looking at the theory. So we are more as practitioners. So there was some kind of a interesting experience for me, and it kind of reinforced my conviction that we are doing the right job when you are training in leadership, and maybe we could pick up something that the corporate was doing in terms of lexicon, the terminology. See, the IIMs and all these management institutes are good at giving jargon, while we only practice. So we need to put, I would say, flesh on the skeleton. So that helped me in putting flesh on the skeleton. But I think I found that we could probably look at some of their approaches to leadership and make it more interesting. That's all.
Any specific takeaways, sir? Like apart from the jargon and the more.
When we are looking, there was particularly one incident or one case study we did on leadership linked to team building.
Right.
So the case study was based on this movie Chak De India. Chak De India is, I think, one of the finest movies which was made on team building.
Yes.
So when I went through the movie without understanding the team building aspect, it was more for entertainment point of view. But when we went over the movie with team building aspects and see how various stages of team building are beautifully captured in this movie, it kind of stays with you. So when I got back and I was doing leadership development in various assignments that I was there, I would actually show this movie and then explain various stages of team building, which people are experiencing, but they don't know how to put it in words. So kind of putting their experience in words by using this movie, it helped a lot in leaving them with a lasting impression.
So so it's quite evident that the constant process of learning is what matters, and that defines leadership. Going by your case also, sir, like already when you were in leadership positions, then you wanted to explore better avenues in learning new traits.
Yes, absolutely. I think learning is a continuous process. I learn even today when I meet young students and I interact with, let's say, many students in colleges. Whatever they speak with me, I think I come back with something new. Even when they ask a question, there's something new in that question. So I think there is a continuous process of learning, I think, till the last day of life.
Amazing, sir. That's quite a trait that, many of the youngsters should take away from you.
Thank you.
So like most Indians perceive of army as a defensive wall, like when there is a particular attack or when there's a calamity, when there's a natural disaster, that is when the army responds. But you also functioned in the strike corps, right? This is completely opposite to the popular perception. So what exactly is this strike corps, sir? And your experiences over there?
See, strike corps as it is called,
Thank you for correcting.
is an offensive formation. Okay. These formations are meant to take the battle into enemy territory. Okay. So these are trained, equipped, and oriented in the sense of their mental orientation is of actually an offensive operation. So all the time we are constantly thinking of how to innovatively launch offensive operations into the enemy territory and cause maximum, I would say, a threat for him to kind of come to terms with our objectives and agree to what we have for him in terms of fulfilling our objectives. So I will not go into specifics. What I'll say is that we would like to force the enemy to respond to our desired end state by launching these operations.
So it is also a form of deterrence. There's also talk about the cold start doctrine, etc. Though it is not in the public domain, though. So this deterrence is also acting as a credible attack.
Absolutely, the existence of strike corps, the very presence on the structure of the army, on the orbit of the army, as also their positioning, where they are located, how they are training, and what are the concepts they are validating. Some are in public domain, some are not. These are meant to give confidence to the citizens of the country that we are training well, and is also to send a message to our adversary that we are good and we can achieve a decisive victory should you take a misadventure. So it's actually adding to the deterrence. It is the most deterring, I would say, a larger component of deterrence for the land forces.
So this is quite interesting, but just a moment ago you mentioned about the location. These are usually hostile terrains. So how does the training or the conditioning of a cadet or an army officer?
See, when the strike corps, each strike corps has its own stated objectives and the terrain in which it's going to operate.
Right.
So we have created training facilities where these units and the formations or the troops are put to validate the plans that we have. We simulate similar conditions of terrain and similar as real-time battle conditions as possible. We have an opposing force, which is actually the enemy force. We create that force.
Okay.
And then these are actually put to test against each other so that the lessons which come out of such an engagement are realistic and we are able to learn and improve. So these training areas are so picked up and developed to be almost like the terrain we're going to operate in the enemy territory.
Right, so that also involves the desert terrain. So could you?
Absolutely.
You also worked in the western sector and also desert terrain. Could you explain the challenges in the?
Yeah, absolutely. Desert terrain has its own very interesting challenges because it is devoid of any cover, any trees. So it's very difficult to camouflage your movements. They can be detected very easily from various means of surveillance, be it satellites, be it aircraft, helicopters, or even drones. So you're actually not hidden.
Yeah.
And therefore, desert terrain demands that your movements are carried out in a way that enemy does not know where is the main punch. So you move in a different formation, move on a wider frontages because deserts give you greater visibility than developed terrain or jungle terrain. So you develop tactics and operational doctrines which would allow us to, even without camouflage and concealment, deceive the enemy as to where we are going to actually hit him. So that's how we do it, and therefore the offensive is widespread with nobody knowing where the weight of the offensive is. And we retain the flexibility of shifting the center of gravity of the offensive
Okay.
where we find that the enemy is weak or vulnerable. So that kind of a flexibility is retained at higher levels of command. And then we are quick to shift the weight of offensive so that we are able to punch a hole in his defenses. And then, of course, thereafter, once we have made a hole in his defenses, we are able to then push the strike corps through to the desired locations and threaten what we want to threaten and make him capitulate.
Right, that's quite interesting, Major. And so, like, usually in movies we see about army parades, like glorification in a heroic manner, these kind of things are seen. But what exactly is the lived condition of an army person, sir?
Yeah, I think the movies kind of glamorize it. It's not all that romantic as the movies make it out. The living conditions of the officers and men, those who are deployed along the border, are extremely, I would say, demanding. With great amount of privation, very frugal living. You are actually living in bunkers or in tents with no basic facilities. So it's something which demands a great amount of, I would say, mental robustness to be able to sustain it over a long period of time. When people are deployed at high altitude areas, let's say 18,000 feet or more, with very low oxygen content, it has an adverse effect on the health, on your cognitive capabilities. So these are the challenges that people go through, and with this, the firing and the activities that the adversary does along the border adds to the interesting life that they have, which somehow movies don't capture fully. They can't actually. They can't capture. Similarly, when the units and formations carry out operations dealing with insurgency or terrorism, those are again something which are absolutely high intensity, high stress operations where you can't see your enemy. You don't know what. He's not wearing a uniform. He's a terrorist or an insurgent.
True.
And he is merging with the civilian population.
Right.
So in that kind of a environment, you're looking at identifying him and neutralizing him. That calls for a great amount of, firstly, intelligence, because you don't want to have collateral damage. And in trying to avoid collateral damage, which is one of the strengths of Indian Army, we end up having more casualties in trying to save civilian casualties. And therefore, these operations demand high levels of leadership and high levels of, I would say, courage, physical courage. And of course, these are intelligence-based operations. There are times when you don't launch the operation when you're not sure. You wait. So and then
an ordeal, right, sir?
And yeah, it's a long wait. It's a long wait.
Yeah.
And then what happens is success is never spoken about. The failures get noticed faster than success stories. So what normally comes out is the not so successful. Success is normally not spoken about. So there are many success stories which remain unspoken.
The mainstream media usually focuses on the limitations, or as you said, the non-successful.
The limitations become news, but the success stories we deliberately also don't want to publicize them, because it results in a certain amount of actions being taken by the adversary, which we would not like them to.
Right.
So we like to keep it under wraps.
So, like you mentioned about civilians and the mindset of the army to protect the civilians. As far as the operations that you participated, is there any situation where there were civilian casualties, and how did you what is the mahal in the force at that time?
See, there will be civilian casualties, even if you would like to avoid. because when, especially in counterinsurgency and counter-terrorism operations, when you're chasing a terrorist or an insurgent who gets into a village, into a house, which is lived in by villagers, and you are trying to neutralize him, there may be some civilians who become casualties in crossfire. But that, to a large extent, I would say, we have been successful in avoiding. But there will be odd case where such things do happen. And these then are noticed and corrective steps taken so that they don't repeat it. And then many of these, if there is an aberration or if there is a case where a willful use of force comes to notice by anybody, those are then taken up and individuals taken to task by our own inquiries. So we are very serious about these collateral damage. We just have zero tolerance for this. So when our officers and men go into operations, they virtually go with one hand tied behind their back, because that's something predominant in their mind, no collateral damage, unlike many other armed forces. So we are very clear on that. And an odd aberration, we take charge. And where there is collateral damage, the effort is made to reach out to the civilian population and tell them that this is not intentional, because it is never intentional. This is something which happens because of they coming in the crossfire. And then we take them on board. And we ensure that we look after the family in the best possible way if they have lost the bread earner. We take care of that, because that's something we can't afford to lose their trust in us. So we go out of the way to ensure, as part of our measures to win their hearts and minds. So we look at these aspects and reach out to the families and take care of them.
So winning hearts and minds, that's quite a statement, sir.
Yeah, it
has a very deeper impact.
Yeah, it's very important. And I think one of the most important strands of our operations, especially counterinsurgency and counter-terrorism operations, this is a very important strand. This we just can't neglect. And every operation ends up in an effort to win their hearts and minds. We do camps for their medical requirements. We do camps for their other requirements, because sometimes when we are doing operations, their normal life gets disrupted. So we would like to get that back and give them that assurance that life will be normal, or life is normal. So we'll make an attempt to give them that sense of normalcy and be some kind of a soothing factor in their wounds that they've got.
That's quite interesting to know, sir. Like, so many aspects are actually being taken care of. Like people in movies like Border or Lakshya or whatever the famous Bollywood or Tollywood movies are. So people only see one aspect of the army, that is a warfare. But beyond warfare, there's so many other aspects, as you're telling. They also look at the human side, and also, several other factors. That's quite interesting. Yes, like, so just you also tell, sir, like one of the things that you were categorically mentioning about the challenges is not just the physical, it is also the mental agility that the armed forces requires. Now, in difficult terrain, like let's say about Ladakh, it's a cold desert condition. There's a lack of oxygen and also several other limitations, whether it is the food, whether it is, the stay, whatever. Now, in this situation, usually whatever is required for physical agility gets inhibited. And at the same time, you said there is a psychological cost to it. People do not have human beings around, and there's a solitude kind of atmosphere that they live in. And so there are a lot of things that play on. So how are the armed forces trained, and how is the agility maintained? If they do not get the rightful let's talk about something basic like a calorie intake or,
No, I think what we do is firstly, as the troops are inducted into high altitude, we have different stages of acclimatization.
Right.
So we start with the first stage close to 9,000 feet, then goes to second stage and third stage. So when the troops are acclimatized up to third stage, that means they are fit for operations beyond 15,000 feet. Thereafter, we don't have acclimatization.
Right.
Once they're acclimatized and located a position at those altitudes, then they actually start training for operations in that altitude. Right. They carry full battle loads. They do all activities that are required of them for either defensive operations or offensive operations. That is with full battle loads. There is no shortcut in that. It is trained. They are trained and they are toughened up both physically and mentally. And actually, one complements the other. Physical toughening, which is done in a very, very systematic manner, gives the confidence to the individual that he can do it.
Absolutely.
And that kind of reinforces the mind that it's not that difficult.
Yeah.
Mind plays an extremely important role in how the body responds. So we take a lot of I would say we spend a lot of time on psychologically conditioning our troops when they are being inducted into difficult terrain. They are not only given a large number of I would say talks on resilience for such operations, or before induction they're also put through what can go wrong and how to protect themselves from physical injuries to themselves or to their comrades. So those are taught to them. They're taught life-saving skills before they're inducted, and then once they're inducted, it is also the team spirit that binds them together, the camaraderie. So they are all there when they're with their comrades. They get a sense of belonging to a unit or a subunit or a team that keeps them going. So this regimental spirit, Naam, Namak, Nishan, these are the three ethos, the regimental ethos. They continue to goad them to perform. It's not that there are people without fear. I think certain amount of fear is always good because it ensures that you don't take any wrong steps. Certain amount of fear is always good.
Absolutely.
And with maturity, with I would say experience, they learn to overcome that. It's not that people are brave to start with, but once put in that condition after training, along with their team members, they learn to develop the resilience, both physical and mental.
Each word that you have mentioned, sir, Naam, Namak, Nishan, and also the context that you've explained is definitely, going to give a deeper impact for a lot of civilians and also army people seeing this podcast. And sir, you mentioned about team spirit and camaraderie, right? So in army or, armed forces, you have something called as a buddy system.
Yeah.
I was told. What is this buddy system?
Buddy system is something which we evolved to ensure that each soldier has somebody who is with him all the time. So the responsibility of the buddy is to not only take care of his buddy in terms of physical requirement. Let's say he's injured in an operation, to carry him, to bring him back, but also be in constant touch with him to understand his psychological state of mind. What are the problems that are pulling him down? If there is a problem at home which is weighing on his mind and he's not able to perform, it is the responsibility of this buddy to get into his mind, to speak to him and ensure that whatever he confides in him, because for that you need trust. Personal matters for anybody to share, only when you trust somebody you do that. So that trust between the two is of the highest standards. And so they help each other in those periods of high levels of stress to overcome the stress and meet the operational requirements. So they are something like your shadow. You don't move without your shadow. Your shadow follows you all the time. So the buddy is like your shadow and is also your savior.
Right.
You have going in on a patrol and you have had a fall, or you got under an avalanche or something, or a snow blizzard, you're injured. This is a responsibility to ensure that you come back with him back to the tents or your habitat. So that's a great responsibility on his shoulder. Similarly, for an officer, his radio operator is his buddy. They're together. They're always together. So the officer will have to rescue the radio operator, or other way around, radio operator rescues his officer if such an eventuality does arrive in operations. So everybody has somebody who's there to be with him throughout and understand him.
So such is a deeper level of connect which is required, and also the level of coordination, as you've just told, sir. So it should be a very deeper level coordinated and concerted effort that they take up.
You just can't make anybody anybody's buddy. It is a mutually acceptable, informal arrangement.
So you can get to choose your buddies.
You do. But the fact is, in the way the army is structured, section, platoon, company, battalion,
right.
They grow up with each other. They grow up from the time they are doing training as a recruit to the training in the unit, living in the unit, living in the barracks. They'll stay in dormitories. So they are virtually with each other. So everybody knows everybody more or less extremely well.
Right.
So there is no such problem in nominating buddies. But my approach to this would be, let them choose their buddies. Because I feel that trust is an important factor. And therefore that mutual trust, mutual bonding is essential. The confidence in each other. So we do allow them. And in any case, we have to make buddies, so we make them buddies.
It certainly makes a deeper sense, and certainly is required, sir. Whatever approach that you have told, that people should be allowed to choose their buddies. Practically, I think that is the right.
If it doesn't happen, we have to nominate. But let's take it to another level. Let's say you have the students who are studying in various coaching institutes.
Right.
If they have the system which is implemented there, you will probably rule out all those unfortunate incidents where students are taking their own life.
Exactly, sir.
So I think this is a takeaway for these colleges which have hostels or coaching institutes.
Right,
they need to probably look at this kind of an arrangement to reduce the stress levels and have an outlet for these boys and girls who are studying there under extremely stressful conditions.
True. As you rightly said, it is the kind of system which is required around, because people feel isolated or alienated. So in that scenario, if you have the rightful person around you whom you can share, or in difficult times you can actually go to them, the go-to person, I think that will, as you rightly said, sir, like resolve a lot of issues of the student.
Absolutely.
That's definitely a very notable suggestion that we would definitely at AKS try to implement. Yes, sir. So you were deployed as India's Deputy Defense Attaché in Beijing. So over there, it was almost about 3 years or so.
Yeah.
Then you ended up learning Mandarin, and also you interacted with a lot of PLA personnel at a integrated level. So what is that specific moment that you realized that Chinese are playing a completely different game altogether than India?
See, when I went to Beijing as the Deputy Defense Attaché, it was just after the nuclear test of India.
Yeah.
So the
2001,
2001 I was there. So the relationship had actually gone down, and it was just recovering as I went. And the high point of that recovery was the visit to China by George Fernandez, the then Defense Minister, followed by Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the then Prime Minister. And this happened just after China was, suffering the effects of SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. Something like COVID, but it was called SARS. So
SARS virus.
yeah, so they were actually isolated. Nobody was visiting them, and that's the time when George Fernandez visited.
Okay.
And these two visits were a kind of a turning point for improvement in relationship between India and China. And we were there witnessing how the Chinese went out of the way to ensure that the relationship is brought back to normal level. And the agreement that was signed between India and China during this visit of Mr. Vajpayee was extremely significant, because after the visit was over, the Chinese officially recognized Sikkim as part of India. So that was the high point of the visit.
Right.
And this was a moment when Chinese armed forces, the PLA, was learning the effects of, let's say, technology in warfare. They had seen the US in Gulf War I, Gulf War II, and they were looking at developing capacities for a potential engagement that they may have in future with the US. They are looking at US as its competitor. And therefore, all the preparations of the PLA were focused towards a challenge that the American armed forces can pose to them in the Asia Pacific, or let's say East China Sea, South China Sea, or Indo-Pacific. With that as the backdrop, the Chinese were actually reaching out to all the armed forces of the world to pick up the best practices.
Right.
So this was a moment when the PLA was undergoing major, I would say, transformation. So they were doing a lot of test bedding, they were doing a lot of trials, and looking at ways and means to improve their war-fighting capabilities, which I would say took about a decade or more. And when the current president came into power in 2012, he was given the mandate to actually transform the PLA to what it is now. And therefore, he initiated the reforms in 2013 onwards for the PLA to modernize. Now, when PLA looks at India, now China-India relationship is a major factor in the relationship is how the PLA looks at India. Because of the disputed border that we have, PLA is a major stakeholder in how the development of relationship is, I would say, allowed to progress. So, while there is a political direction to improve the relationship, the PLA is a major factor to shape the minds of the political leadership. Because the Central Military Commission, which is headed by the President and the Chairman of CMC is the President of and General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, all the members are military members. The President is the only civilian in the CMC. So therefore, these are the people who influence PLA's and China's approach to India. And therefore, when we look at how India-China relationship has developed or is developing, PLA is a major stakeholder. When PLA and China look at India and Indian armed forces, they look at it as a competitor to China's rise as the sole power in Asia. So they would not like to see India challenge China's supremacy in Asia. While they would like to challenge American supremacy in the global, and they're looking at a multipolar world, they're looking at a unipolar Asia. That is the Chinese attempt.
Right.
And to a large extent,
that they have established their hegemony in the Asian subcontinent?
I think it would not be right to say that, because China has got much ground to cover. While economically they have done very well, and much of their economic progress, the credit goes to the way the Americans have allowed them to grow. And they have realized the mistake that they have made.
It certainly makes some sense.
Yeah, they realized the mistake they have made. They thought by allowing the Chinese to develop, they would be able to
contain them,
change the governance that China has undergone, and change the way they approach the world. They thought they will be able to make a transition or transformation of the the Chinese system, which has not happened. Chinese have learned from the Soviet mistake and have ensured that such a transformation or change is not induced by exposure to the Western developed countries. So that they've ensured. And therefore, the Chinese look at us as a competitor, and they would like to also contain us within South Asia. And within South Asia, they would like to create pressure points for us so that we are actually saddled sorting out these problems on a periphery, which will affect our growth to a large extent. Look at our neighborhood. Something or other is always happening in our neighborhood. We have a hostile Pakistan on the western border. Bangladesh, we have seen how things have turned in Bangladesh over the last couple of years.
Nepal.
With the current government in Bangladesh, BNP, we need to see how things develop. It's too early to say. Tariq Rahman seems to be inclined to improve relations, but we have to see. Nepal, we have witnessed a lot of turbulence. Sri Lanka has gone both sides. Maldives, we have seen a complete flip-flop. So we have these, I would say, influences of outside powers, including China, in our neighborhood,
predominantly,
which keeps us mired in South Asia, and we're not able to realize our full potential. And as the foreign minister put it, we need to develop the economic heft. The economic heft is something which will give us the elbow room or elbow space to kind of exercise our full potential and realize the space that we are looking at on the high table. We have to develop our economy much more.
Rightly, sir. Now, I just want to understand, do they consider, the Chinese considers India to be a competitor or a threat, sir?
They're looking at us as a competitor. Because if you look at the India-China relations over the years, we have always reacted to what the Chinese have proposed, be it on the border, that is the line of actual control, or even in diplomacy and negotiations. The first step is initiated by the Chinese, and we are reacting. First time that we have been able to change that trend was after the Eastern Ladakh clashes in 2020, when we said that this is how we're going to deal with China. And they were quite unsettled by the way India approached China after the Galwan clashes. And I think that remains the I would say, a tipping point in how India is going to look at China. And that's very important. In spite of having done that, the trade deficit that India and China, the balance of trade between India and China is not in India's favor.
Absolutely.
And therefore, government has taken many initiatives to put it right, but those initiatives will take time. It will take time. And the interim, we need to be able to deftly handle China and see that economic coercion that China can possibly leverage against us is not allowed to happen.
You're taking a cue from what you've just said, sir, the trade deficit. We have a significant trade deficit with China. We still buy the Chinese goods. And also, even after clashes like Galwan, we are still having we are still in the situation where we cannot avoid buying this Chinese goods. Now, is this strategically incoherent, or can we say it to be, realism?
No, I think it's being pragmatic, because the items that we are buying from China, if you look at the trade basket, the prominent ones are electronic goods, some amount of, I would say, APIs, active pharma ingredients, which we don't manufacture, and certain other goods that we get from them, which are manufactured goods, which we don't manufacture. But when we look at our export basket, These imports from China, while they appear to be part of a larger trade deficit, are the inputs for India's exports to other countries where we have a trade surplus.
Yeah.
So when we look at trade deficit with China in isolation, we end up with a feeling that we are imbalanced.
Correct.
But the trade deficit should be seen in the light of India's overall trade and how these items that we are buying from China are actually helping us do trade with other countries and generate trade surplus. So I think when we look at it holistically, it's not that bad. But government has embarked on a couple of schemes so that in, let's say, a couple of years, I would say maybe in another 5 to 10 years, we should be able to probably reduce the dependence on these products that we buy from China.
That's quite a balanced and pragmatic approach that we should eventually evolve.
Yeah.
So like talking about PLA, like when you were interacting with them in private, would they open up, sir? Like, or, they're always this tight-lipped kind of people?
No, PLA, we must understand that in the Chinese system, the way information is actually managed, nobody knows everything.
True that.
They know only that much that they are allowed to.
Yeah, I was just coming to that. Yeah.
So even when they interact with you, even when they are conversing with you on a supposedly friendly way, we must be very clear that they will not be able to share all that we would like to know. Because firstly, they are not aware. Secondly, unlike Indians who are prone to get emotionally carried away, they don't. They don't have that. They're very clear that there is no friendship in foreign relations. It is your national security and national interest. So if we at any level, at highest level to lowest level, if we are under any kind of if you have a feeling that he is my friend across the border and he'll share something with me, I think we are mistaken. They will ensure that their national interests are protected, and therefore we should not be under any misconception that any kind of a personal touch will come into any official negotiation. It may just give you a window to negotiate. The negotiation itself will not be based on any acquaintance or friendliness that we possibly think we have. It's a mistake.
So they're clear about their mandate and also the, what is...
Yes, absolutely. They're very clear. And there is no emotions in national interest and national security.
Right.
We may think that he is known to me, I have a cup of tea with him, I meet him on the border or I meet him on some delegation. But I think that's just superficial. So earlier we learned that the better it is at the highest level and at the lowest level.
Rightly said, sir. Now, this approach should we adopt with all the countries or is it only with the China?
All the countries.
Based on your experience, sir, like
no country is going to.
No country is an exception.
No, not an exception. You see what's happening with the US administration now. So things have just turned 180 degrees with the new administration.
Right.
The close relationship that we enjoyed with the US during Biden administration,
right,
at least visibly, is not even there today.
Right. So there was a lot of expectation.
So no, we were aware of it. We knew that the window for us and US to engage is limited.
Right.
And US by nature has no credibility. They are transactional as a country.
Right.
I mean, they are that way. And it's important that we understand. And while the going is good, make the best.
Yeah.
And then be prepared for the worst. At least we'll not get shocks.
That's realism.
Yeah, we have to be pragmatic.
Right. Like, what is one dangerous misconceptions that Indians have about China? that if it is not rectified at this point of time, that could be detrimental for India's interests. Based on your learning and experience, if you could just...
See, there are two things. Firstly, people to people, there are no issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's always government to government. You look at any country.
Right.
So when that is the equation, the Chinese will always find that India on the rise is not in its interest. So while border or the line of actual control is only a manifestation of this competition that India and China have, the resolution of the LAC will not remove this contestation. It will continue because China would not like to see a competitor challenging its, I would say, position as the only power in Asia. China looks at itself as competing with the Americans and looking for a bipolar world and not a multipolar world. And eventually China wants to be the only pole. It believes in the concept of Middle Kingdom, that it is the center of the earth and everybody is, around it. So they would not like to see India rise and challenge it in any way. So all that articulation that we hear, that there is space for both to grow, is fine, I would say, diplomatic, statements, but we need to be guarded. We need to make the best of the convergences we have. There are many areas in which China and India actually collaborate when it comes to climate change agenda.
Engagement.
So there is a convergence. So we have to identify those areas where India and China converge, and maybe take them forward and try and reduce the areas of divergence and not let them escalate. That's important.
Sir, is there any fundamentally different from Xi Jinping's China compared to Deng Xiaoping's China? Or it was always that strategic DNA, they continuing the same path?
No, what happened is when Deng Xiaoping came to power, he came after the Cultural Revolution and after the Mao's, I would say, legacy was no more prevalent. And he realized the pitfalls of Mao's tenure. And the kind of purging, the kind of, I would say, economic destabilization that happened. And therefore, he embarked on 4 modernizations. And it was very clear that China must modernize on 4 aspects. Economy was one of them. And last among them was the PLA. So when he embarked on 4 modernization, it's famously said, it doesn't matter what color the cat is, so long as it can catch a mice. So he was very pragmatic. And he had told the Chinese leadership that we should not assume a leadership position. We must keep a low profile and bide our time. And when it is time for us, and we know that we have reached that status in terms of economic power, what they call as comprehensive national power, that is the time when we should start asserting ourselves. If you look at after the 2008-9 global economic downturn, China had conducted the Olympics and then they had the Shanghai Expo and then realized that they are economically much better and they are in a position to now shed Deng Xiaoping's dictum of bide your time and keep a low profile. And they started asserting themselves. So it's around 2010-11 that the assertion by China became prominent. It's not that it is Xi Jinping who was doing it. It was always there. It was just that they were following the dictum given by Deng Xiaoping till such time Chinese realized that we are now strong enough to be on the high table and start asserting ourselves. Xi Jinping, the unique factor about Xi Jinping is that he has changed the constitution of China to increase his terms from normal 2 terms. He's doing a 3rd term and possibly he is the president for life unless something happens. So he has taken a couple of steps essentially to ensure that the primacy of the Communist Party of China is retained. And he has also ensured that the Chinese people are, are allowed to develop while there is no external influence on the society. He is looking at ensuring the cohesion of the society, because exposure to a democratic West can create turbulence in the society. So he has taken all measures that are required to ensure that there is no possible interference from outside world to Chinese system of governance and how they run their show. So that's how it is done. Some steps are retrograde. While we may say that those are retrograde, as far as Xi Jinping is concerned, those are the steps necessary to ensure they don't go the Soviet way.
Yeah.
And party retains its primacy.
So like you said that they want to establish, and that is the declared doctrine, that they want to be a superpower, right? Now, in the recent times, when we see about crisis, the geopolitical crisis that we are seeing today, whether it is with the India-Pakistan or Ukraine-Russian crisis, or very recently the United States, Palestine, Israel, and also Iranian issue, several other issues. Like, now, to be a superpower or global power, you also need to be proactive, or at least you should have a stated objective which is clear. Now, China in none of these instances has come to the rescue or even taken a stand. Or, I mean, what do we consider them? Are they neutral, or are they alienated?
No. I think that will be incorrect to say. Chinese support to Iran has always been there.
Yeah.
In terms of military hardware. And so has Russian support to Iran been there. And when the US-Israel attack on Iran happened, Operation Epic Fury, two countries which came out very clearly against these strikes as illegitimate strikes were Russia and China.
Right.
Besides this, the third country which came in support of Iran was Spain.
Right.
No other country actually spoke against these strikes.
True.
So, therefore, in terms of support, political support to the cause of the Iranian government, the Chinese and the Russians are there. The NATO countries...
But don't you think it is just like a lip sympathy that they've offered?
No, I don't think so. There is much that is happening which is probably not there in the
naked eye
to the public domain. Because their support to Iran will remain in terms of technology, in terms of intelligence sharing that they have done, of the US deployments in Gulf. So has Russia been doing. And also, they have recently signed an agreement with Iran to supply hypersonic missiles, hypersonic light vehicles. So, if that is actually realized, the Iranians will have hypersonic light vehicles or missiles which will beat all kinds of ballistic defenses. Today also, Iran has Khorramshahr missiles, which have actually beaten all the defenses that the Israelis and American combined have put up.
Yeah.
So I think the technical support, intelligence sharing, and political support is all there. Much of this happens in terms of the support that has already been given by both Russia and China to Iran during peacetime. During war, if America is not willing to put boots on ground for Israel, China and Russia will not. And Russia, as it is having an engagement with Ukraine on which it is totally committed. So Russian support to, I think, Iran is political, and also I would say intelligence sharing and technical. So China has made it very clear. China is extremely unhappy with the way the Americans and Israelis have gone against Iran. NATO countries are also divided. None of the NATO countries actually came in support of Trump's request for opening out Straits of Hormuz.
Yes.
So the unanimity in NATO or the relevance of NATO is something we need to see how it evolves. This is a defining moment in the geopolitics when the churn for a new geopolitical order has actually started. Now, it depends which way will India go.
Right.
The meeting that our Prime Minister had with Putin and Xi Jinping last year when he had gone to China is an indication of certain amount of developments. India is doing its, I would say, statecraft in a way that it's keeping many options open, because in our multi-alignment policy that we follow, we are looking at engaging with any and every partner who is supporting us in our cause. So depending on the cause that we are looking at countries that we can, align with and work with. So we're not looking at going in favor of one or the other. So this is something that we followed even after independence. We said we are non-aligned. Non-alignment is actually nothing but strategic autonomy of a country which has just got independence and does not have the required economic heft or the military heft.
True.
But now that we have grown economically, we are the fourth largest, we're looking at becoming third largest. We have one of the best armed forces, I would say the third largest. We can today look at, I would say, a reshaped non-alignment in the form of multi-alignment. So we're looking at aligning with many partners, issue-based alignment, so that we are able to get the best for India.
So, having said that, there's also, many media reports stating that during Operation Sindoor, the machinery or the missiles that Pakistan has used, and very recently in the Iranian crisis, the kind of equipment and machinery that Iran has used that was imported from China have not actually had any kind of efficacy. Doesn't it hamper the image or the trust factor with China?
I think certain amount of these media reports, we must take it with a pinch of salt, because when you look at the technological differential between, let's say, US, Israel and Iran, it's a huge differential. Right. There is no comparison of the military forces of Iran with US, Israel combined. They are totally asymmetric and totally tilted in favor of US and Israel. Yeah. Notwithstanding that, it's been almost, this is the fourth week of the war running, and we don't see Iran giving up.
Right.
So
not anytime soon as well.
Exactly. So the way Iranians have approached this war is totally different to the way the Americans and the Israelis have approached. And this is an approach that a less powerful nation would always like to adopt when confronting a superior force, superior country. And that is often asymmetric warfare. The Iranians are using all asymmetric capabilities to tackle the threat from US and Israel. And many of Iranian successes are not actually in the public domain, because there is also a narrative war which is going on, which is predominantly Western dominated.
Absolutely.
So unfortunately, the truth will only come out once the ash settles down.
We can only hope for it.
Maybe. But to write off Chinese equipment as an Indian, I would say it will not be right, because we are saddled with the Chinese, not only on the border with China along the LAC, but also with the Chinese equipment with the Pakistanis on the western border, and also with the Bangladeshis. So we have to face that. And to say that the equipment is not effective would not be a right approach. As a military planner, I would like to plan for ineffective equipment and then take measures that will ensure success. If I plan for something in the hope that it is not effective, I may actually be compromising our own capabilities. So I would not like to take that. I would not like to underestimate the adversary.
Certainly makes sense. So talking about LAC, media often sensationalizes it, and sometimes politicians say that try to tone it down. What exactly is the situation in the Indo-China border? And for many of the viewers who do not know what exactly is LAC, if you could explain in detail regarding the same.
The border between India and China is in three sectors.
Right.
The western sector is a border in Ladakh. The central sector is where is Uttaranchal and those areas, and the eastern sector is where the LAC is defined by the McMahon line, which the Chinese don't accept. And in the eastern Ladakh, we have 3 different lines, but we have, since neither side has decided on any of the lines, we use the entire border. We call it as a line of actual control. This was arrived at, as an understanding between India and China post 1962 war. So, therefore, we don't talk of McMahon line, we don't talk of Johnson line or any other line. We just talk of line of actual control, because this is the line where each of the countries has control over the territory within its claimed areas. So this is not the border. The border will be decided when the 2 countries sit down together and there is an understanding as to where the border should lie. So that involves a lot of exchange of maps, exchange of claims, and may involve give and take of territory, because if you want to take territory, you have to give territory. Because the lines have been drawn by somebody on a map which was on a smaller scale. So when you expand the scale, the line itself covers a couple of ranges. So but the principle of watershed is what India and China, that is the principle on which the boundary was drawn, or border was drawn. So that is the principle. As far as the situation on the border is concerned, post Galwan incident, there has been a very tenuous, I would say, situation, because the Chinese had moved in a large number of troops opposite Ladakh, opposite our deployments in Ladakh. And similarly, there have been deployments in other sectors. So that was hampering any kind of forward movement of bilateral relations. 2024 October, an agreement was signed, and then we agreed to kind of normalize relations. The Indian government had made very clear that de-escalation, de-induction, and going back to the permanent locations of all the troops is the prerequisite for situation to be reset. So now we are looking at PLA pulling back its troops from all the various locations from where they have come in back to their permanent locations. That process would probably be on, which I would not be able to comment on, because that's something which would not be in public domain.
Yes, we totally understand that.
But what has happened after 2020 incident is a breach of trust. And for once at least, we have realized that the strategic trust that we were investing in has been lost. The Prime Minister made a lot of attempts to meet Xi Jinping and took a great amount of pains to build that trust. And it took no time for the Chinese to breach that trust. So therefore, I think we have probably I'm saying, learned a lesson, and we'll be cautious. And as I would say, the foreign minister has said, it's a continued normalization that we are looking at. And as the Chief of Army Staff has said, the situation along the northern front remains stable but needs constant vigil. So that means that we're not going to trust without verification. That's one thing. Second thing is, I think we'll be cautious now. And we have been developing our capacities, but maybe the capacity development was going on at a slow pace. It would probably get an impetus, but we need to work extremely hard to develop our capacities on the border areas to ensure that we stand to match them in every way.
Why does it always happen with China, sir? Like starting from the times of Nehru, the era of Hindi Chini Bye Bye, and to the present times that we have discussed, why does it always happen? Like we trust China, or we are inclined to trusting them. What is the actual narrative, or what is the actual, strategic idea behind this?
I think when Xi Jinping came to power, and it's about the same time that even after maybe 2 years,
Yeah.
the current government came into power. They both were well-intentioned when they met. Xi Jinping was very keen to actually settle many things. But like I said earlier, the major stakeholder remains PLA.
PLA. Right.
So therefore, while Xi Jinping has hardened over the years in terms of his approach to India, I think the major factor in India-China relations remains India's proximity to the US.
Okay.
Chinese perceive India's proximity to US or India-US strategic partnership as an attempt to contain China's rise. And therefore, they create conditions along the LAC or in other fields where it is strategic messaging to India that you go closer to US, we retain the leverage to needle you. So this flip-flop will happen as the Chinese perception of India's relationship with US. There are two schools of thought in China. One school of thought talks about weaning India away from US. And they say, this school of strategic thinkers says that China must do everything possible, soften its stand on India, so that India is pulled towards the China attraction and moves away from US. But there's another school of thought which says that they must do something in terms of demonstrated activity or show of force, which will ensure that India realizes the mistake of going too close to US. So these two schools of thought are prevalent. The hawkish school normally prevails because that is the attractive option. And that's how this relationship between us and China is panning out. But having gone through the Galwan incident and having responded to them in a way that we did in later part of the escalation, they realized that it is not easy to probably, escalate on the border with India. So they will probably, keep it on the low ebb. Border skirmishes in terms of border interactions and all. With the new patrolling policy in place, both countries are trying to avoid any kind of a border incidents. But we have to see how long will these new agreement will stand the test of time, because an agreement is as good as the paper it is written on. One side can break it any time. And usually it has been our experience that it's the Chinese who have set the tone. Like I said earlier, we are always responding.
Taking a cue from that, sir, like the US Pentagon's 2025 report says that China has always put Arunachal Pradesh as one of its core interests, on the same lines as the South China Sea, Taiwan, etc. Now, like over here, the hardening stance of China. Recently, there was also reports that a woman from Arunachal Pradesh was detained in Shanghai because it stated that she's not holding a valid passport. She was holding an Indian passport though. So I don't know what is the reality behind it, but this was reported in the media. Now, is this hardening stance of China signaling something to India?
No, it's basically China has never accepted the McMahon line as the dividing line between India and Tibet. And then they call Arunachal Pradesh as Changnan or Southern Tibet. This is basically to ensure that their claim on this area, which are essentially parts of Arunachal, now they claim entire Arunachal actually, since last 10 years or more than 10 years, is to put pressure on India. Because reportedly earlier there was an attempt to have a swap agreement, wherein China would retain Aksai Chin and India would retain Arunachal Pradesh, which India did not agree. Now that China has developed economically and is modernize its armed forces and feels that it has the heft to possibly leverage that heft against us, they are creating these new narratives. Arunachal Pradesh is in our occupation. We are living there. There is no question of anybody trying to lay claims to Arunachal. The 2005 agreement between India and China is a significant agreement which says that settled populations will not be disturbed. That more or less settles the boundary issue without settling it. So wherever we have our people living along the border, they will not be disturbed. So that stays with us. So therefore, these claims are more, I would say, of messaging and creating pressure points, and they have no relevance. And China
what about the Tawang sector, sir? It has both strategic when it comes to the Siliguri corridor and also the spiritual significance.
Tawang is very much part of India, and there is no dispute on that. And even the Dalai Lama has said that Tawang is part of India. So there is no question of any claim by China being accepted at any time. There is, we are totally clear as to entire Arunachal belongs to us. When we say that there may be a give and take, it is maybe some small tract of land here and there, but certainly the entire Arunachal belongs to us. It's only where, when we draw the line on the border, one ridge here or one ridge there, and we are looking at following the watershed principle to ensure that our interests are protected.
But there are also reports that they're encouraging some settlements and, build up of dual villages, etc.
They're developing. They're developing villages along the border, and they will, which can be utilized for logistic and military build-up in case of, I would say, military confrontation. But that has not resulted, or that has not really happened in our territory. It's in their territory. They're well within their rights. And I think if we don't do it, then something wrong with us. We are also embarked on a program of vibrant villages.
Yeah.
But that will take time because, like I said, we are responding to what the Chinese have done. So we are behind schedule. But I'm sure if the government is able to infuse funds and monitor it proactively, we will be able to ensure that our population in the border areas does not move away. We already have population there. The problem of the population moving away to cities and denuding the border areas is something that we are concerned with. Otherwise, we have people living there. We have to make them empowered so that they continue to stay there. So we have to take education, we have to take employment, we have to take all other basic amenities to those remote areas, so that they don't have the attraction of moving away to cities.
As part of a conversation regarding China, several times you mentioned that our policy is reactive or responsive. Now, do you think, India's foreign policy in relation to China, is it because of the civil and military gap? Because usually these foreign policies are designed by bureaucrats like Indian Foreign Services and, some involvement of political executive, etc. Of course, they'll be taking the technical know-how from the military. But in practicality, what is happening? This gap that we are seeing is because of the civil-military gap.
I would not say that, because there is extremely close interaction, and decisions are taken in a consensual manner. So it will be incorrect to say that the decisions are taken without referring to or without taking the concerns of the armed forces. No, it doesn't happen. In fact, they're quite integrated, I would say. Yeah, very well integrated. And it's actually a whole of nation approach that we are following. But the neglect that we have given to development in these areas along the border over such a long period of time is something that we have to catch up now.
Right.
And the catching up will take time, because we have not paid attention to these areas. And responsiveness or reactiveness is essentially because of the the gap in comprehensive national power.
Hmm.
India is a, let's say, 4 trillion economy. And China is even given on a higher side, let's say, even if you're considered to China, 18 trillion. So almost 3 times. Let's say 3 times. 3 times is the economy. US is 25 trillion, plus minus. That is the difference. When US grows at 1% or China grows at 5% or India grows at 7%, look at the growth of GDP and look at the difference in the actual numbers. We have to catch up.
Right.
The economy is key. Growth in economy, growth in GDP is key to developing our capacities and our heft. And Dr. Jaishankar was very clear when he spoke on one of the interviews in Delhi, when he said that, how do you expect me to escalate when I'm depending on the other country for so many things?
True that.
So we need to develop the economic heft. We need to grow, and we need to grow at a very high rate if we have to catch up, because China has grown at double-digit figures for more than 3 decades. We have not reached double-digit. We are, at best, we reached 8.4%.
Yes.
I think we need to look at high growth rates sustained for longer period of time, so that we are able to develop that comprehensive national power.
That certainly sums up the situation, sir. Now, there is also a widespread term used, the salami slicing. China occupies territory inch by inch, and without declaring a blatant war, they try to occupy territory. Now, how does a conventional, honorable military like India deal with this kind of situation?
See, what has happened is, over a period of time, whenever China has attempted to capture territory in bits and pieces, we have responded and we have been able to push them back.
Right.
While that has happened, we've also understood that the threat from China in the normal course of time will be well below the threshold, in the grey zone. Chinese are adept at using grey zone warfare as a means of changing the status quo.
Right.
Be it in the South China Sea, be it in East China Sea, or be it along the LAC. So we are seized with that, and we have contingencies which have been worked out to respond to any such changes of status quo by Chinese. And not much is out in public domain, but we do respond with great amount of resolve and ensure that they are not allowed to change the status quo. So there is an attempt by the Chinese. They will attempt, and if they don't attempt, something is wrong. But then I think we should be prepared for it, and we are responding, and we are prepared. We have got our contingencies worked out. We have things on in control. But this is something that is strategy or a tactics that Chinese use. The grey zone warfare, where it is below the threshold. So you don't even know whether it's a war or not. So you don't know how to respond, what force to respond with. But I think we have understood the game, and there are adequate measures in place.
We are cautious enough.
Absolutely.